I was in this city, and I saw it didn't love. Queer hatred cruised the streets, gutters washed away its secrets, drains overflowed with guilt. And shame was that thing.
Welcome back to Meet the Poet. For any newcomers here, my name is Florrie Crass, and today's guest poet is going to be the brilliant Simon Maddrell. Simon is a queer poet, writer, and performer from the Isle of Man, and his most recent solo pamphlet, Queerfella, was a Rialto pamphlet competition winner, described as a journey from shame to unashamed. Simon's poetry ventures through many ideas: the significance of the Isle of Man, his mother and her passing, and this Meet the Poet in particular explores Simon's experience of growing up gay and the hardships that this presented. Now, do leave any questions or comments you have on Simon's poetry in the chat box below, and of course, do feel free to drop us a like if you enjoy the programme. And it's time to welcome Simon to Meet the Poet. Simon, hello, welcome to Meet the Poet. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. Looking forward to it.
Good to hear. So let's get started by hearing a little bit of your poetry background. Almost, I want to know when you started writing poetry.
Yeah, well, apart from the sort of the teenage angst ones,
Mm.
the first poem I actually wrote was in 1995. It was after a really traumatic event. I was in Africa on a youth expedition, and to cut a long story short, we ended up transporting a young woman who tried to self-abort, and she ended up. Well, I don't know if she was trying to self-abort or she was trying to take her own life, but she basically poisoned herself. And myself and a young 18-year-old lad drove her to the hospital, and she died like 5 minutes before we got there. And it was very traumatic, in particular for him. And that evening, I actually wrote a poem about it to give to them, because they completely shut down and they couldn't access their emotions. And it was a good way of me expressing mine too. So that's the first poem, which actually did 25 years later get published.
Wow.
But I really seriously started writing after the death of my parents. Both of them died in relatively short succession. And sort of a combination of that and getting quite into Bob Dylan, I started writing, I guess, pretty much the sort of stuff I would have carried on writing as a teenager. And that sort of developed for 4 or 5 years, until I sort of started to realise around about 2016 that it was something that really was my vocation. So I started writing more seriously from then, and then became published in 2019. And since then I've had about 70 odd poems published, 2 pamphlets and another one coming out now, and in about 14 or 15 anthologies. So it's been quite a 3 years of becoming a poet, I guess.
Yeah, and it's so nice to hear that you returned to it after those 25 years, and that you still managed to work your way into it. And I mean, you write quite a lot also about being gay and living with HIV, and I wonder how that what your experience of being in the poetry community and writing about those topics, what that's been like.
Um, well, I mean, as you know, poets tend to be on the more liberal side of things, particularly those who are young or young at heart. So it's a very welcoming. I really started my proper poetry journey by the spoken word circuit in London. I used to go to, maybe 15 or 20 events a month.
Wow.
So that was sort of where I learnt part of the craft, if you like. And through that, of course, that does have a very high proportion of queer poets, people of colour. And yeah, so it's always a welcoming place to be able um, to express those things. And at quite an early stage, I met Joelle Taylor, who's, you know, like inspiration plus 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 plus,
Yeah.
and also a number of her workshops and stuff, which also sort of empowered me to talk about things that perhaps I wouldn't normally have felt able to, even in what is a much more liberal environment, I guess.
Yeah. I hope that lots of people have had that influence from Joelle Taylor. It's fantastic what she did, and I was so pleased when she won the T.S. Eliot Prize. But it's amazing that you've had that influence from her. Um, and I mean, I was wondering, who or what inspires you to keep writing, but I guess she's one of those people um, who encourages you.
She is, and
Um,
the I mean, the first person I met, sort of from um, a, a workshop mentoring perspective, is her very good friend Anthony Anetsaguru, who again came from a spoken word background. Um, so it was sort of, he was my first inspiration and encourager, and it was sort of via Anthony that then through Outspoken got also to know Joelle, and both of them supported the work that I did in my first two pamphlets, Throatbone and Queerfella. But obviously, since then, there's a whole list of poets that I've been to poetry classes with and attended that have influenced me in a whole range of different ways. But I'd sort of be loath to start listing them
yeah,
because
start
I'd
reading them
miss
off.
someone
Yeah.
out, and I'd I,
No, I won't put you on the spot. Don't worry. But speaking of Queerfella, it might be nice actually to hear some of your poems, and you will be reading first from Queerfella, which for people watching at home, it was one of the winners of the Rialto pamphlet competition, and you describe it as a journey from shame to unashamed.
yeah, and this is it. So it was actually the joint winner with Would You Believe Salima Hill, which was really sort of a bit hard to get your head around, really. Um, and yeah, I decided to choose a couple of poems that were um, based on childhood experience of watching two films. Um, One of them was when I was about 6 or 7, and the other one was the week after my 10th birthday, which was called The Naked Civil Servant, which was a groundbreaking film on ITV back in 1975 about the life of Quentin Crisp. The first poem is The Boy with Green Hair didn't want to be different, but technicolor shone from his cheeks. Like me, at 6 or 7, he wanted things to stay the way they were. But leaves fell like sickness. No medicine worked. If it goes away all by itself, let's not stop it. Maybe it was something in the milk or the water or a secret dye. I woke one morning with a meaning schoolyard chants had guessed. Mum and Dad weren't talking. Such wars aren't good for kids. Strange fancies clutter our thoughts. And this is, excuse me, the naked truth. That morning will never slip. I know where I stood on those painted lines, kids circling, shrieking, Quentin, queer. That pitiful, flamboyant, lipsticked man. How dreadful to be hounded like him, but in a single, short breath I knew. Horror gushed down my spine, colder than any ghost. No one knows. Go back to class. Don't talk of this ever again.
Thank you, Simon. Um, two just really brilliant poems. There's this. overwhelming idea of secrecy, but also of not being able to hide. That's the impression that I get from both the poems. And I wonder when you felt like you'd stopped hiding, when you felt like that wasn't you anymore.
Oh, um, well, there's hiding and hiding, of course.
Mm,
Um, and there's consciously hiding and there's unconsciously hiding.
mm,
I mean, I think I was only fully free after my father died, because I'm not doing any of those poems today, but that was a very difficult situation of this sort of unsaid truth between us that I was never entirely certain whether it was. I think by the end I was sure that it was known, but it was one of those unsaid things that in many senses weighed on me.
mm,
And there was that feeling of not wanting to tell someone something that you knew that they didn't want you to tell them.
mm,
And that's a burden. Um, and but much before that, the issue was more about not really understanding. Who were my role models as a child? Quentin Crisp frightened the bloody life out of me. Liberace, John Inman. They were all either figures of fun or shame, or everyone that was gay died. There was no positive role model. If only I'd known Wilfred Owen was gay when I studied him at school as a poet, my God, my life would be completely different. Maybe actually I'd be dead. Who knows? But that lack of any reference point, any positive reference point, and any positive understanding that actually there are gay people in the world that succeed, they're actually good and achieve things, and built Adrian Wall that I used to go up and visit lots and lots of times when my uncle rented a farm up there. Walked along Adrian's Wall. Did I know that Adrian was gay? No. Would my life have been different if I had? Yes. So there's a worldly silence, and then of course there's a silence within. And you may know the researcher Brené Brown, and she talks about shame and says that they need three ingredients to grow, and that's silence, judgment, and secrecy. And I had all three of those in spades. So that's that's the challenge, and I think in many senses I'm part of a wonderful poetry stanza called "Voicing Our Silences," which is run by Alice Hiller, who was shortlisted for the Forward Prize with her an amazing collection. And that for me is reflects a project I did with Brighton Festival last year, which is that through voicing our silences, even if the experience with someone else isn't shared, one can feel the authenticity of that, and therefore can be moved and can be inspired and can be affected and changed as a result of those things being shared, even if they're an experience that we don't even fully understand or we don't share.
I wonder if it might be a good point to hear the piece that was created in response to the Brighton Festival work that you did.
Yeah, sure. I'll just say a few words about that. I mean, I was very lucky to work with Neil Bartlett, who's a queer icon in theatre and author, and he was commissioned to do at Brighton Festival last year an installation called Tenebre, Lessons in Darkness, which was a sound, word and light installation in an empty Theatre Royal. So the theatre was empty and there was a small audience on the stage. And this was inspired by a piece of music that I can't recommend enough called Lessons de Tenebre by Francis Couperin. And this is like an operatic performance of the Lamentations of Jeremiah, which are the poetic laments for the destruction of Jerusalem in 586. And it consists of 14 verses in 3 parts, separated by a refrain. And slowly but surely, in this sequence, the lights, each light goes out, 14 lights, one by one, until eventually you end up in darkness. And I guess to give you a flavour of what that experience was like, there was another poem that I wrote, which I'm not going to share the full amount of, called "Oh Silence," and this is the final stanza of it. My old darkness, this moment a candle flames from its dark spill, a memory in each flicker. Music lifts from its glow, the smell of raging rope. And what if I let you speak? And we were asked to do our own version of the Lament. And again, I've got Neil Bartlett to thank. I got about halfway, 2/3 through this, and he stopped me and said, "Simon, you do realise that this doesn't have hope. It ends in darkness. You need to keep going." So beware, I keep going. And this is Lament for Doomed Youth. I was in this city, and I saw it didn't love. Queer hatred cruised the streets, gutters washed away its secrets, drains overflowed with guilt. And shame was that thing no youth could name. I saw a boy holding sweet peas and smiles, the tender petals of childhood dropped. A father preached his preference for a thief over a queer, for a son whose youth was damned before it began. Judgment delved down the boy's throat, grabbing that apple with one bite gone. The boy blamed a belly of snakes and faced a wall nailed with a wreath. He wept inside like a broken fridge. The boy was alone in a city of amber lights. No prayers or holy glimmers could hold a flaming candle to his sad eye. Demented choirs sung words they did not understand. Boyhood wailed into a void. Playground screams echoed a monstrous truth that the boy knew was his. With no mother at home, he spoke instead to the wall beside his bed. He scratched a hole in hope to escape those wet sheets and all that stank. Oh, silence, silence, my fear. Oh, fear, submit to darkness. Oh, darkness, release my breath. I saw this boy in the city where he learned to fight for others but hide from himself. Each glimpse of darkness begging for a cure. The boy couldn't sleep, nor could he rise from crusted sheets and hidden depths. He visited the city where he was born, and still his joy was declared a crime. This state of disgrace, pleading freedom, desperate to hang himself, to swing with sorry scrawled on the soles of his shoes. In an eastern city, his brother's death was a drawing down of blinds, a loss so mourned that it saved his life. I saw that boy could not leave his parents, the burden of another child's body to burn, to bury. The boy left for the rainy city where the police chief stalked dank canals and alleys, a dark blue spectre watching his every skip. God's copper dreamt of thrashing queers until their wheels begged for mercy and salt. Oh, silence, silence my fear. Oh, fear, submit to darkness. Oh, darkness, release my breath. Then gravestones tumbled black and white. God's reminder this cesspit was a bed he wet himself. A grey monolith says ignorance equals fear. The boy's terror howls. Silence equals death. The shadows bugle. Action equals life. One by one, each city became a ghost, snuffing out a generation of lost uncles, brothers, and lovers. The boy wished he had, never had, or ever would. What bells toll for those who died like rabbits, stacked in numbered boxes that families disown. The leader spoke to her nation and revoked a gay boy's inalienable right to breathe. Along with all those queer children cheated of a sound start in life. Yes, cheated by mockeries, pretend families who lied over their kids' deaths. He roamed a city with big lights, on streets where the only place left to look was dark, a deep dark that did not end with the dawn, a black dark that could not be reached by sun or moon. He lost sense of the edge between love and touch. He set out from that city to a salt sea coast, wrapped in a shroud. He learned to kill ghosts. But it was far from this gravel-blind beach that he saw his darkest fate, a place from where he did not rise, and the sand blew to dust. Oh, silence, silence my fear. Oh, fear, submit to darkness. Oh, darkness, release my breath. Oh, breath, breathe in my peace.
Thank you, Simon. It's a heartbreaking and necessary poem, but I can only imagine how difficult it must be to read. It's stunning, and I think the way that you're looking back to your childhood, everything that happens then, and how much that sticks with you. Thank you so much for reading that. It was really beautiful.
Thank you.
Does it get easier to read, or does it? I mean, I don't know how much you've performed it.
Um, I performed it not that many times. It was a lot harder to write than it is to perform. So that might give you an idea.
Yeah.
In many senses, it's yes, it's a very personal story, but it's also a story of the trauma that gay and queer people have been through over the last 50 years, and particularly that time when it's unconscionable. Section 28. And there's a psychotherapist friend of mine. I commented that that it must have cost thousands of lives, and they said to me that sort of in their circles, their estimates are tens of thousands. Imagine to be told by your own government that you do not have a right to exist, that no one can talk about your existence. It's just unfathomable. And
It's horrifying.
of course, many people kill themselves as a result, and I think it's and that coming amidst the growing HIV/AIDS pandemic, which it wiped out a generation, as I say in the thing. The potential, my potential brothers, uncles, and lovers that could guide you through that whole process of surviving in a world that doesn't even want to admit you exist, is so necessary. But most of them disappeared. We lost a generation, and I think it's important. I know I would say this anyway, but I think it's important that those stories, that we fill that gap of the lost generation, and it's why these stories need to be said more than once. It's a sin doesn't solve the problems of the issue that I'm talking about, even though it might be obviously a wonderful contribution to that issue.
Thank you so much for sharing this poem and talking me through it. As I said, it feels like a really necessary piece, and it was a pleasure to hear you perform it. And I think it links quite nicely to the next poem, this idea of silence. And I'll let you explain a little bit more about the next poem.
Yeah, sure. This poem was first published by Ambit. My first, it was the first poetry journal I ever read, and the first one that I ever wanted to be in. So I was delighted last year to get in it, and very soon, I'm sure I won't get into trouble for saying that I actually have 3 poems in the next issue, which are in memory and praise of Derek Jarman. But this poem also appears in my latest pamphlet, which was a joint venture with Vasiliki Albedo and Mary Mulholland, all about our mothers. It's a fabulous initiative by 9 Pens Press, where 3 poets do 9 poems each. But as I say, as you say, silence is a key thing that influences the way in which we behave. And you probably picked up in one of the poems that my mum left home when I was at a relatively young age, which caused obviously a lot of issues to our relationship. And in my early 20s, I had therapy, and that was one of the things of that was actually to sort of regress and share with my mum what that 9-year-old kid felt at the time. And then I need to take a deep breath for this one. And then this happened 2 or 3 weeks later. This happened. She never came unannounced, but that afternoon the door knock did. Mums don't need to ask to sit, but she did. Crouch on a dining chair in the lounge. Mums don't need to ask to speak, but she did. Punch memories out with her truth splattered around the hearth. In 1938, not 1992, the teacher spotted the blood running on the playground, draining its way from her head with a hole, the shape of a mother's left stiletto heel. The evacuee sent on a long country vacation, her baby sister left behind, both collecting a stash of happy childhoods for future masquerades. Innocent flushed out of the cracks after being dropped on the pavement outside her home, a welcome mat face down behind a locked door. Leaving a child seamstress in Shoreditch Triangle, an unreconstructed jigsaw littered with wars, holes, open wounds at home. A sweatshop with a girl in the owner's attic. Mum hid in a raincoat on the street corner, handing out sweets and magazines just for that one little girl. Too young to remember her sister, until their mother banned glossies and gobstoppers for free. After all those bells and lemons of 16 years, self-sacrifice from London Bridge seemed a duty. Faltering, she landed in Holloway instead. Released, she devoted herself to 50 years of nursing. Mums don't need to ask to sit, but she did. Crumple on 4 wooden legs like a blackbird broken as the evening chased the sun to the moon. Then there was a stillness and a song.
Thank you, Simon. There's that beautiful ending. Then there was a stillness and a song. And how you sort of touched on this before the poem, but how do you think that stillness and the idea of the song relates back to this silence that keeps coming through?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, that small last stanza, it just came to me, and that even though I perhaps I wouldn't like to try and describe what that then there was a stillness and a song actually means.
Yeah.
The words just came to me, and
Yeah.
I think for me they evoke that feeling of release and the feeling of what was shared and what was achieved through one person sharing their silence and another person better understanding another. And that's a song.
Yeah. It's just a beautiful poem. I kind of want to sit with it for longer and just go over it again and again. There are so many beautiful elements that come out, and it sounds like your mum had a really big history. Yeah. And this collection that you've put together with these two other poets, this is coming out soon. It's coming out end of January.
Yeah, it's coming out on Sunday. We've got
Sunday.
a launch event on Sunday. It's available to pre-order now from 9 Press. So,
Okay.
and I mean, I love Vaz and Mary. It's three very different mothers, but they are astonishing poems. I mean, actually, personally, I think Vaz's and Mary's are more astonishing than mine, but it is a remarkable collection where I think I'm sure that some people may have a mother like mine or like Mary's or like Vaz's, but even if not, they'll be able to see snippets of their own relationship with mother. That I mean, of course, we all have a mother. It's one thing that human beings all have, whether we know who they are or not. We all have one.
That's very true. Yes, and this will be out by the time people are seeing this. So if you're seeing this, do go and take a look at that, because if any of the other poems are as captivating as this one, then I'm sure it's absolutely worth the read. And we have a few more poetic offerings left from you. I'm really looking forward to hearing these last few ones. I'll hand over to you to share them with us.
Sure, yeah. Well, I think I think after that we all need a bit of a break, and maybe a bit of lightheartedness. And I think have you seen my 9 pens mug? In fact, I didn't do that on purpose. So yeah, I thought I'd end with. I mean, every queer poet, certainly every gay male poet, has to have a grinder poem, and I'm going to give you 3. The first of these was actually published by a great online journal called Untitled Voices, and the second and third are 2 stories from Queerfella, which, as you can tell, I'm enormously proud of. And it has some really interesting poems, I think, around the father relationship too, particularly in Queerfella. And hopefully next year, because Mary Vaz and I have also collaborated on a collection called All About Our Fathers. So hopefully that will also come out sometime. But here's 3 grinder poems. Advice for grinder users. Spread with vanilla offerings. Crave wide open pods filled with sweet seed. Delicious tongued lips. Be careful what you wipe. Yesterday all over again. Avoid the cheap John. Beware the tight wad. They'll turn up phony. Artificially flavoured otter. Milked beaver anal glands. Sacks brown and sticky. The reward for munching barks and leaves. That was inspired actually by a story that some vanilla, and it's actually a true story, but it's not as common as they were making out, that vanilla flavouring can be got from anal glands of beavers, and how actually some artificial vanilla flavouring is from that. That's what inspired the poem. Anyway, back to Grinder. All too often. Those all too often moments on Grinder, when it's all going so well and they want to meet up and fuck. Blocked. Why did I say I'm a poet rather than which way I prefer to do it? Maybe they dread what may be said straight after the pillows are puffed. Maybe it's in my head. Maybe as they scroll down, it was my HIV status instead. Alternatively, fuck and go, door open on his hands and knees, ready and waiting for me to undress my cock. He said it would be like this, maybe 20 minutes, he wouldn't throw me out before an hour. Turning, now he wants to kiss me, touch me, suck me. How easily he slipped into this, and then 3 hours later, I left. Knowing we couldn't play cards against humanity in pairs, however much I wanted.
Thank you, Simon. Oh, a fantastic sort of triptych. I have to ask, how do people often react or respond to you when you read these poems?
Um, well, a lot of people, it is quite common for people to say how much they enjoy the way that I read them.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's lovely to hear. I hear it a lot. I guess I just need to make sure that more people have a chance to say that would be a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Simon, it's been an absolute joy hearing your poetry. Thank you so much for coming to join me on Meet the Poet and talking through your work with me. You've been a wonderful guest. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Florrie. Well, thank you for inviting me. And of course, as we discussed, my poetry spans a lot of areas into eco poetry and poems about the Isle of Man, where I was born, and such like. So, yeah, it'd be great for people to keep an eye out and check out on me, and particularly the ambit with my Derek Jarman poems, which mean a tremendous amount to me. But thank you again. It's been a pleasure, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Oh, no problem at all. There will be links in the description for people to stay up to date with your work and everything. I will just say to everyone watching that if you have any questions, comments about Simon's work, then do leave them in the comment box below, wherever you're watching this. And of course, feel free to drop us a like or follow us on our socials or sign up to our mailing list. But we'd love to hear what you thought of Simon's work. And I'm sure Simon would too. So thanks everybody for watching, and thank you again, Simon, for being a brilliant guest. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
As cameras circle, news feeds buzz, this woman's grief points like a finger to a truth beyond proof. Its red crescent still, just visible. This fest is mercy's banner, sunset stained.